Hi everyone, and welcome to another video. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final video in the history of medicine where we're actually looking at the content of the course. I will do a couple more extra videos where we look at some of the overall ideas, but for now this is the final one where we're looking at the actual syllabus itself. And it follows on from the previous video. If you've watched that, you'll remember that we looked at some of the government campaigns in trying to prevent illness, to try to keep the public healthy. And this one is probably the most important campaign of all. And it's to do with smoking and obviously the effects that it has, particularly where we look at diseases like lung cancer. Now, back in the 1990s, there was a great band. I liked a lot of their music, ladies and gentlemen. And they were called Oasis, the Gallagher Brothers. Now, they were a great band, but they had terrible advice because they sang a song called, and one of the lyrics in the song was, "But all I need are cigarettes and alcohol." Yeah, it was the name of the single, Cigarettes and Alcohol. Great song. Terrible advice. Now, we're going to have a look at the history of smoking and what the government has done about it. Go back 100 years or so. 1900, before 1900, lung cancer was actually very, very rare. Now, why would that be, do you think? Any ideas? Well, maybe people were dying younger from other diseases. As we begin to sort out those other diseases, we begin then to die from lung cancer because we are smoking. Now, go back to World War I, 1914 to 1918. Cigarettes were included in the ration pack that was sent to the soldiers. And the soldiers in the trenches where life was very, very difficult, they would enjoy smoking. It was very, very popular. So the First World War increases the population's interest in smoking. And then we get to the 1920s and the 1930s. And tobacco companies realise that obviously the more cigarettes or tobacco for their pipes that they sell, the more money they'll make. So they get into advertising, trying to persuade people that smoking was good. And some of the adverts were looking back now, were crazy. They were trying to suggest that smoking was good for you. Smoking was cool. Smoking would keep you slim. And in films and on television, most people would be lighting up in a scene. Smoking was central to people's lives. And as a result of that, obviously the rate of lung cancer began to increase. And from the 1950s, it starts to increase. And now we're at the stage where sadly over 40,000 cases a year of lung cancer are registered and recorded. Why would that be? Well, obviously, the link between smoking, nicotine, tar, and the damage to our lungs, lung cancer. Now, this was picked up way back in 1950. Two scientists called Doll and Hill showed that there was a link between smoking and lung cancer, and yet many people still smoked. Why would that be, do you think? The advertising, correct. Now scientists say, look, the link between smoking and lung cancer is about as high as 90%. We all know that now. Back then, of course, it wasn't. Some of the campaigns back then, very, very strange. Almost like false advertising. Often dentists or doctors would be shown in the poster, almost saying, encouraging smoking. There's one where it said, oh, most doctors smoke Camels. That was a brand of cigarette. Now, a doctor is supposed to be trying to encourage health, not to encourage smoking. But this was what was on display back in the 1940s, 50s, etc. Okay? Even, unbelievably, there was a poster campaign at Christmas where Santa is saying, oh, look, here, have some cigarettes. What a great Christmas present. Santa used to try and spread the message that smoking was somehow good for us. Father Christmas. Have you ever seen a cartoon called The Flintstones? Fred and Wilma and Barney. Yabba dabba doo! Flintstones, hear the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. Yeah, have you seen that? Excellent. Well, back in history, ladies and gentlemen, the Flintstones were used by a cigarette company called Winston's. And at the end of certain episodes, characters in the Flintstones would be seen smoking. Fred, Wilma, Barney, etc. Surely that's a case of yabba dabba don't. But can we see that the message is trying to be put out there? That somehow smoking, the doctors, Father Christmas, cartoon characters, they're all trying to say that smoking's okay. The government had to do something about this. Now, what could they do? Well, they could try and get us to prevent lung cancer. How could they do that? 1965, they start banning cigarette, tobacco advertising on the television. It was a start. The tobacco companies then, we're being challenged. Let's try and work around this. So what they did, they started to sponsor sporting events. Now, some of you might like snooker. Every year there's the World Championship based at the Crucible in Sheffield. Well, for many, many years, the World Championship of snooker was sponsored by Embassy, a tobacco company. It was called the Embassy World Championship. Can you see what they're doing there? Cricket, another very popular sport. Benson and Hedges, a British tobacco company, sponsored one of the competitions. Formula One, John Player Special, Marlborough, all were heavily involved sponsoring teams in the Formula One races. Meow! Oh, that's glamorous. Oh, look, it's linked with cigarettes. Fantastic. That's how the tobacco companies work their way around that. So the government again had to respond to this. 1971, the government's campaign says, right, we are passing a law, we are getting involved, we are interfering, and we are forcing tobacco companies to put health warnings on the cigarette packets. And in 1971, the words actually said, warning by Her Majesty's government, smoking can damage your health. That's as far as it went in 1971. 20 years later, 1991, the EU, the European Union, they said no, cigarette packets have got to have two warnings, one on the front saying tobacco seriously damages health. Can you see what they've done? They've removed the can and they're making a statement, tobacco seriously damages health. And on the back, it says quite clearly, smoking clogs arteries and causes heart attacks and strokes. So it's being put on the cigarette packet more plainly. 2003, another intervention by the government. And on the cigarette packet, 30% of the space had to say smoking kills. Just two words. Smoking kills in quite big letters. Or smoking seriously harms you and others around you. It's been more blunt, the warning. The governments are fighting back. against lung cancer. The campaign is starting. 2006, 2007. For many young people today, the idea of smoking in a pub, or smoking in a restaurant, or smoking on a bus, it just doesn't happen today. But it did when I was growing up. 2006 and 2007, the government introduced the bans on smoking in public places. If I'd be allowed out to go to the pub when I was a bit younger, the next day your clothes would smell of smoke because people were smoking in the pub. When I went to school from the age of 11 to 18, I used to travel upstairs on the bus with my friends. People around me smoked. Downstairs on the bus you couldn't smoke, but upstairs you could. And the government are trying to stop this. 2006, 2007. 2008, again, going back to the cigarette packets, they start to put quite horrible, terrible pictures on the cigarette packets, for example, of the mouth and all the sort of teeth falling out. So quite graphic pictures or photographs are being put on showing the effect of smoking, the government getting heavily involved. 2015, instead of having the name of the brand, it had to be in a plain package, and it was hidden from sight going into shops. Now you see the books there behind me. Well, before the government got involved here, the cigarettes would be on display. Now they're covered, and you have to ask, and they lift the shutter up and give you the cigarettes. So the government have got involved. Has it worked? Well, what do you think? Here's a couple of statistics for you. 1948, the year the NHS was set up, remember, 65% of men smoked. 1948, 41% of women smoked. Now it's down to 20%. So yes, the government campaigns have worked. Fewer people smoke now. But yet lung cancer is still quite high because they've been smoking for years. Recently, of course, we have e-cigarettes. You see people now walking around with these things vaping. So they're trying to do something about it to prevent lung cancer. Because lung cancer can be a terrible disease. If you get it, well, first of all, how do people know that they've got it? The worry and the problem with lung cancer is by the time you've got symptoms, it's often too late to do anything about it. That's why it's better to prevent it. How do we diagnose it? Well, of course, you go to your doctor and they then send you for x-rays, CT scans, bronchoscopies. They put a tube down and have a look and take some cells and check them out, all using technology which we've talked about before in medicine. And then once you are diagnosed with lung cancer, the treatments, well, surgery, remove part of the lung, radiotherapy, beams of radiation targeted at the cancer cells, chemotherapy, powerful chemicals, which have quite powerful side effects, unfortunately, immunotherapy, trying to trick the immune system and get the cancer cells to stop resisting the immune system. All of those treatments work to some degree, but they are not very pleasant. It's better not to get the disease in the first place. Prevention is better than cure. And that explains why the government has been so interested and so determined to try and stop smoking. Their campaign, as an example, 2003, the government spent £31 million on anti-smoking campaigns. It's a lot of money. So there we have it. Government campaigns, finance, science, technology, the factors all linked together. Finally, the government are saying laissez-faire. Oh, this idea of not getting involved. No, ladies and gentlemen, that had gone. Here's a campaign where they're saying we've got to get involved. We've got to go against the tobacco companies with their Santa and the Flintstones and all their campaigns. Has it worked? To some degree. Well, there's the last video showing you some content. Remember what I said at the start? I'll give you a couple final more videos where we're looking at right the way across the course. Hopefully some of that will be useful. It's coming soon. Take care now. All the best. Speak to you soon.